Hello again, everyone. So now that we've taken the computer apart, let's go ahead and put it back together. So let's go ahead and start the way we ended. Let's go ahead and add the motherboard back. So for purposes, again, easier purposes, I'm going to turn the case down. And I'm going to look at my board here, and I'm actually just going to, while I've got this down, I'm going to look at the screw holes that I have available here, which the motherboard actually sits up on. And I'm going to kind of line those up. Now, if you remember, we had to kind of tilt it out at an angle and pull it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure on the back that I'm lining up the ports that are right here and lining them back up with the openings we have on the back here. So I'm actually going to move to this side here, and I'm going to go ahead and just look at the holes I have here, line them up, and kind of just place this back in there like so. Okay, now you're going to want to obviously do this while it's facing down. So now that I've lined everything back up, I'm going to set it here, making sure I have no obstructions in the way. And I'm going to go back to my screw bag here. For these purposes, I'm going to empty them because I am aware of where they all go. This is a point where you'd want to refer to your pictures. And we had a total of 2, 4, 6 screws here. So I should have 6 screws that are all alike. And I am aware of which screws those are. So I'm going to go ahead and pick out the 6 screws that secure the motherboard. Alright, so now I'm just going to go ahead and reapply the screws here. Alright, through the magic of video and recording, I've got ahead and just finished putting in those screws. So now when I turn this back up, you'll see the motherboard is attached. Now if you'll remember these pieces right here, I mentioned that they're very important. We're going to go ahead and attach those first because they require a little bit of extra help here. So if you'll remember here, we had our green LED, I believe at the bottom here on this port, our white one up here. You want to make sure that the words are facing back this way towards the back. I'm also going to go down here. I'm going to reapply now. I'm actually going to use the very tinily written letters here to match this up because I kind of missed part of this. So if I look here, I should be able to see now that the power switch and the reset switch should line up along with the hard drive LED right on here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply these here. First one, second one, third one. Once again, I'll mention again, if you find that you're hitting the power button on the front, this could and it's not turning on, this could be possibly one of the points of failure that you would want to check. There are many called points of failure with this due to the amount of connections here. So I've gone ahead and I've reconnected the front section portal here. I'm going to go ahead and reconnect the second set. And I have 2 separate ones here that are my grounds for power. So I'm going to go ahead and apply those. And I'm also going to go ahead and apply the other remainders here. Very important that you took a picture of this because these are, I had to go ahead and refer to this myself a bit to figure out where these were. Now also, on the bottom of your cases here, I'm hoping that they all have them. It looks like on 2 of the other cases they do. There is a nifty little reference sheet here as well, which I will kind of bring your way. A nifty little reference sheet as to where all of those connectors go. So you could also refer to this. I would still recommend taking a picture because, you know, you can tell for sure where it is and there's no confusion. Of course, you want to make sure that diagram is facing the way it's facing. You want to kind of line it up to make sure that it's facing the same way as the main board is. So I've gone ahead and I've reconnected those small pieces down there. So I'm going to go ahead and just put my RAM back in here. Now this only goes one way. It's keyed in the middle here, so it's only going to go back in there one way. So I'm going to go ahead, and we have two slots here. I believe it was in the slot that is closer to me. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is return it to that slot. You don't have to return it to that slot particularly when there's only one stick. And also here in small letters you'll see one says DIMM 0, one says DIMM 1. This first slot would be DIMM 0 that you want to put it in because it follows the traditional numbering pattern 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So DIMM 0 would be the first lowest point. So I'm going to go ahead and just put this in here. Make sure that your clips are flipped outward. We're going to make sure we put that in correctly. As I mentioned, it is keyed and it will not snap in if it's not correctly put in. So I'm going to go ahead and flip it back the other way. And you'll notice it now flips in. I'm going to go ahead and return my CD drive. Just going to slide this in from the front. I'm going to line it up here because if you'll recall, we had these snaps. Now this actually snapped into place for me as I started moving it back. And you'll want to make sure that your where you would put a screw is lined up. And that's a good way to know. So then what you're going to do, push that forward to lock it in place and slide your button down. Now this button, there we are, and you'll hear that click into place. Go ahead and return my floppy drive. Go ahead and check for lining up the screws because I feel like this one's not properly falling into place. So I'm going to do that. Line that up. Bring this forward. Slide goes forward and pop it down. And finally, I'm going to take my hard drive, which goes in from the back, slide it onto the very bottom shelf here, in between the ridges. Just kind of line up my holes here. So, in this case, we've got two holes. You want to make sure that you're not hitting your wires on the... Well, if you are hitting your wires on the front, it should be okay. Actually, we could actually bring this back slightly and go with one screw here instead of two. Actually, it would help if we put this in correctly. Actually, here, you'll notice I did not put the cord part here correctly outward. Put that back here. There we are. Better line up with our screw holes. I'm going to go ahead and apply the two screws I had here. Should I believe I only had one screw here. And this one was a flat screw. We're going to go ahead. I'm going to apply this to the middle part of this to kind of keep it in play here, actually. Take that guy out. Once again, importance of pictures to make sure your screws are correct here. And apply that screw there. And if you'll remember, on the other side we had two screws for the floppy, one screw that was a little troublesome with the hard drive. Now that we've loosened that screw up, we should be able to apply it back in fairly easily here. And this is a process, you know, there's no need to get frustrated. If you're doing this, just go back and look at things again. So I've applied the one screw to the hard drive. I'm going to apply the two screws here to the floppy drive, which I believe went right about... Oh. Once again, you'll see here I didn't get this fully lined up. And you can see that from the screw hole marks. There we are. And now they line up. I'm going to go ahead here. What I did there is, you didn't see on the other side with my hand, those white slides. I went ahead and loosened them up really quick so I could move the floppy drive back forward. So now I'm going to go ahead and apply my screw, my smaller screw here, and my other smaller screw to the other side. And obviously, if you put the front of the case on and you find things are not lining up, you'll need to just go back and take a look. Now, as I'm moving along here, I will know that now that I have these screws in, I can actually go ahead and put this side back on, just so you're eliminating pieces. So you just want to make sure it lines up with these little holes here, and you'll notice here on the bottom, these notches here, that's where that goes. So it's going to be all the way back from like when we first took it off. Now some of your cases kind of bow outward a bit. You're going to want to just go ahead and make sure you hold it in the middle as you're sliding it back on. So if you'll recall, we only had one screw on this side. I'm going to go ahead and just apply the one screw back to this side. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and reattach my cables that allow the various drives to communicate with the main board. If you'll remember, I mentioned we had this white slot here. We had the black slot, and the blue went in the black slot, and the black end went in the white spot. So we will just put that right there. And if you'll remember here, this cable actually had gray on it, so I know that that was for the hard drive. And these are kind of bunched together, so you're kind of going to want to follow the trail of which one goes where, unless you've already taken a picture and you have identified that. Now I'm going to see here that this is my secondary, which that means that would go up top to my CD drive, which I will plug in there, and I will now plug in my hard drive here. And of course, the floppy drive, which is a shorter, it's a little bit shorter connector than the other two. We are going to go ahead and place that in there. And once again, the portholes or the connectors are keyed, which means that they only go one way. So we're going to plug that in there. And I'm going to route this back to my floppy drive here. Okay, so I think we've got everything good here. Let's go ahead and re-add the fan, which I have here. We're going to go ahead and here, I believe we had this facing this way. Actually, you'll notice the screw markings there. So this actually goes this way with the label facing backward. To our exhaust, I am just going to take and face that with the wire down again here. Here, so, and of course, if you remember, these screws only go in with the fan because of its type. So this is one screw that you can make sure that you definitely put back in right because they're only going to work on this piece. All right, through the magic of video, I've gone ahead and just finished re-putting in these 4 screws on the fan here. I'm going to go ahead and reconnect the fan here. If you'll remember, we had 2 connections. We had this one and this white one. This longer one was just kind of out in the open here. So the white one actually has a white end, and there's actually a white connector back on the board here. So I'm going to go ahead and just reconnect that right back over here. And that is at the top of the board right here. Now it's also keyed, so it only kind of goes in one way. There's a little portion of that is sticking out right behind the processor here. And I'm going to take the shorter of the 2 cables and plug it down below here, which goes right next to these white slots right there. Okay, so we've applied the fan. Let's go ahead and put the front back on. You know, we skipped this a little bit earlier. I mean, you can put the front on whenever you like, but we're just going to line this back up and get this looking a little bit nicer. And what you want to do is kind of make sure you set it on top of the CD drive, because that is the kind of hardest place, or the pinch point to go back on. And you'll just make sure you snapped it into place. And you'll notice everything lines up, so we were good when we did that part. Now I'm just going to go ahead and put the power supply back in here. You want to make sure you line up the screw holes here, because it's only going one way. If you remember, I believe we had these parts here, or these ports here, that were facing out. So we'll go ahead and slide this back here, like so, and line up my screw holes here. Now you're probably going to have to hold this again while you put this back in, because it'll want to fall. Let's see here. All right, through the magic of video, I've gone ahead and just reapplied the 4 screws here. Let's go ahead and get everything reconnected. So you'll remember we have our main board port here, which is also keyed, has a little clip on this side, so it's only going to go back in one way. So I'm going to go ahead and reapply that, and that should snap into place. I've got my auxiliary keyed as well. It has the clip here. I'm going to reapply that on this side of the board, and just to give you a nice little look of that, you will see here that goes over here like so, and the 4 red, or the yellow and black, go here. Now there are multiple ends of this type of cable that look the same. You can use either one of these to plug into the hard drive or the CD-ROM drive. We've also got 2 strands of this that have multiple on it. You can just plug any of these in. Usually we go with which one reaches the best easily. And you have multiples in case you had more drives in here. You would be able to kind of just have them on the chain together to have them all get power. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply this one here to the hard drive. I also have coming from the hard drive a power for the floppy drive, which I'm going to, this is also keyed, so it's only going to go in one way. I'm going to apply this to the floppy drive. And then I'm going to take this remainder and apply it to the CD-ROM drive. All right, I'm going to double check and make sure I've got everything together. We've got our bottom connectors for the front switch. We've got our fan in the back. We've got our mainboard power. Everything appears to be in place, all locked, power supply. We are going to now go ahead and we are going to put the side back on. All right, if you'll remember again what we had with the other side, you may kind of start putting this on and realize it's kind of poking out a bit. You'll want to hold the middle and get it to slide on back towards the front. Now, if you find that you're really having issues, which I am, go ahead, put it on its side, and use the force of your hands to get it to slide in easily. And then we have our 2 screws here. So flip this back over, make sure it doesn't slide back, so it's still on track. And then we're just going to go ahead and put our 2 screws in. And now we've taken apart and put our computer back together. Good luck on putting yours back together.